Welcome back, everyone, to the latest episode of Everyday Eternal. I'm Matt.
I'm Sam Craven.
And you may notice that we're actually on a new website.
Yes, we got our very own website. We're a grown-up podcast now.
I think we've been around now for over 2 years, or it'll be 2 years quite soon, and we finally have our own website, so congrats to us.
Yep.
You guys made it all possible. Actually, you didn't. We did everything. Thanks for listening, though.
So let's jump right in and look at some of the cards from this new set.
Yeah, so Dragons of Tarkir came out, I guess, just this past weekend when we're recording this cast.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's quite a few cards in here, and let's go over their applicability in Legacy, Vintage, and no other formats.
Yep. Let's quote Sean's email for why he's not here today.
Yes.
Wake me up when they unban something with text in Legacy or ban Derpstorm.
So, suffice to say, he will not be joining us for this cast.
Just unfortunate with his history in Vintage. He tends to have some unique perspective on cards that I would not have expected for Vintage, but I don't think there's very much of that in this set.
I agree with that statement. So, Sam, do you want to kick it off?
Let's start out with the mechanics, because we won't be mentioning cards with a lot of these mechanics, so let's just talk about them so that we know what they are. The first one is Bolster. Bolster reads, choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control and put a +1/+1 counter on it. So the sample card for this is Sandcrafter Mage, which is 2 and a white, creature, human, wizard, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, bolster 1. It's a neat ability. One of the things that they've done in this set is, as well as in the previous set, is there are cards that care about whether or not they have +1/+1 counters on them. So this adds a little bit of a neat kick, I guess. A good way to put some upside on a creature without making the creature too big.
Yeah, and it's bolstering your garbage tokens that may have been worthless at some point, because they're just maybe a chump blocker or whatever, but a 2/2 is so much more relevant than a 1/1. So, like I said, what's the next one we want to go over?
The next one is something that has been brought back, which is Rebound, which is if you cast a spell from your hand, exile as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast the card from exile without paying its mana cost. Obviously, that's a mechanic that has the ability to do some really wacky things. We'll be talking a little bit about that mechanic as well. Exploit reads, when this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature, and then most of the creatures that have this also have something that when this creature exploits a creature, something happens. So the sample card is Silumgar Butcher, 5 and a black. Exploit, when Silumgar Butcher exploits a creature, target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn.
Yeah, so, good on its own, but if you have some extra tokens kicking around, why not? Another one is Vulturous Aven, right? If you exploit a creature, draw 2 cards and lose 2 life.
And there's some obvious synergies to be had here as well. There's a lot of creatures that do something when they die. From more recent things, not that you're going to be exploiting this, but Scuttling Doom Engine would be fantastic to exploit.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't remember what that card does.
Nope, but I assume if you mentioned it, it was probably A-okay.
It was, I believe it's a 6-mana artifact, and when it dies, it deals 6 damage to target creature or player.
Okay.
And I had said that sounds awesome in Welder stacks.
Yes, it does, actually.
Moving on, Dash. Dash is dash and a cost. You may cast this spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and it is returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. This reminds me a lot of, was it Unearth in Conflux, where you had these creatures that were hasty, and then you could reanimate them once, and it turns these creatures almost into burn spells.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Sprinting Warbrute is some 5-mana, 5/4, attacks each turn. But for its dash cost, you cast it, gains haste, and then, return from the battlefield. It seems okay.
Well, it seems very balanced to me because in fact, I believe all of the dash costs are cheaper than the regular cost.
Yeah.
So you're having to pay that over and over again. But as an upside, they can't use any sorcery-based removal. They're not going to be able to use any sweepers because that's removal. You're protected from any planeswalker abilities that may remove it, like a Jace ability.
Yeah.
I played one of these. I played several dash guys I played a 6-booster sealed Dragons of Tarkir event the other day, and dash was excellent. If I could have played mono red, I would have.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting ability. I'm not sure if it's quite playable. At least the cards that have it are, not the greatest, especially in Legacy or Vintage, but I'm wondering how far they can push this mechanic until it actually becomes playable in Legacy, because, like, who wouldn't want to play, say, a Dash Tarmogoyf or something, right?
Well, and even if you put this on a smaller creature, you get to put a very big negative on a creature in that it comes back, so you can kind of push the creature's power limits in other ways. So, instead of a 2/2 haste in red, you might have a 3/1 haste in red, but you have to cast it every single turn.
Yeah.
And that gives them chances to remove it at instant speed, counter it, and of course block it as normal.
I really enjoy the design space there, but we'll see.
We also have Formidable. This is kind of an extension of an earlier mechanic. The ability checks whether or not you control 8 power of creatures. So the sample card here is an elk. Whenever it attacks, if creatures you control have total power 8 or more, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn.
So, I mean, with this, like, say, Elk Herd is the one that I'm looking at right now, it's already a 5/5. So, I mean, you have to control 3 power worth of other creatures for everything to gain trample on attack. Like, that's probably not hard to do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I stack my triggers in the attack step right, this works really, really nicely with Exalted, correct?
Yeah, if you announce them correctly and do everything properly, I think it should work just fine.
That being said, 8 is a lot of power to have on board at once in Legacy. Generally, if that's happening, you've got 2 Goyfs or a Batterskull and 2 or 3 other creatures, or you're playing Reanimator where you wouldn't be playing one of these creatures anyway.
Yeah, you're either winning or getting Terminus, so it doesn't really matter.
So this is probably not a mechanic that we will see a whole lot of in the formats that we are fans of. And the last ability is Megamorph. There's kind of some whining and gnashing of teeth over this mechanic. Megamorph is Morph, but when you flip it, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. And that's fine, but why not just have Morph with an extra triggered ability on the creature?
I agree. Like, I don't think there's any reason to not have this as... you didn't need to keyword this. This is Morph. When you unmorph this creature, add a +1/+1 counter.
I think more than that, this is, we needed X number of keywords in this set, so let's add this one.
Well...
Maybe that's just me being super cynical.
We are typically...
Regardless, obviously something that's megamorphed in is better than something that's morphed in, right?
Well,
that depends on the card, of course.
Yeah, I'm not impressed with this mechanic. Like, no. That's all I have to say.
Shall we get into individual cards?
Of course, please. Start.
Let's start with the face of the set, Sarkhan Unbroken. He has now been, has he been every single color?
Let's see. So he's been Sarkhan Regular. So that's red, right? Sarkhan the Mad is red-black. No, the first one was red-green. Don't think he's been white. That's the only thing.
So he's the closest one to being the first 5-color Planeswalker?
He's very moody. He's like, oh, I'm a white mage, I'm this.
Let's talk about what it is. He's 2 and a rug. That's 2, green, blue, red. Planeswalker Sarkhan. Okay,
so 5 mana. So already he's, like, in my mind, I see this mana cost is like 3 different colors, 5 mana. He better be real good, because Jace, very good. So he starts with 4. 4 is okay.
That's good. You're not immediately in bolt range.
Yeah, so what's the first ability, Sam?
First ability, +1, draw a card, then add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool.
So, the first turn he comes into play, you get to draw a card off him, which is okay. Like, I have no problem with this. And you add 1 mana. I'm not really sure what you're doing with the 1 mana on turn 5.
I think you're kind of, it's more like Sarkhan cost 4, but has a check for whether or not you have 5 mana sources.
Yeah, so I don't think the 1 mana makes that much of a difference. But okay, so then his second ability, -2. Put a 4/4 red dragon token with flying onto the battlefield. That's okay.
Certainly, and starting at 4, assuming that your opponent doesn't, bolt Sarkhan or attack it, you're talking about 5 mana for 2 4/4s. That's not too bad. Assuming that you went straight to those 2 abilities.
He does protect himself while producing 4/4s, but his protection means he's down to 2. So, like, a Delver is getting through, like, if you have 2 creatures, like, he's getting bolted. I would have liked to have seen him produce a 4/4 and stay at 4. Now, however you would have had to have done that to achieve that is up for debate. But I would have preferred, for a 5-mana Planeswalker, he should survive a bolt and produce a 4/4 token, in my opinion. So say he started at 6, and then, like, -2 was produce a 4/4, and say his +1 was whatever. Do you know what I mean? I think, like, to be playable.
Yeah, it needs to just, after activation, be a little bit less vulnerable, basically.
Yeah, I agree. What's his last ability, Sam?
His last ability is -8. Not too bad when you're starting at 4 and probably plussing. Search your library for any number of dragon creature cards and put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Obviously, that's insane. Big problem, not a lot of people playing dragons in Legacy.
Yeah, so, like, what's your actual win condition? Like, you could just run, like, four Bogarted Hellkites and 20 of them, right? What else could you do? Shivan Hellkites. Like, there's a bunch of dragons in this set. I mean, if you're getting to 8, you're putting a lot of power on the board, but does that power survive Terminus?
Yeah, well, and besides that, you're looking at spending 5 mana, so it's probably turn 4 or 5, ticking up for 4 turns, and then minusing.
So it has to be in play 5 complete turns.
Yeah, so I think if anyone were to use this, it would be in a completely new deck to abuse the ultimate.
So then what happens when you draw these shitty dragons, like, out of order, right?
Well, I mean, if you're able to play this, you're probably able to play some dragons pretty soon. I just think that the bigger problem is you're spending a lot of turns getting up to mana to do not a whole lot other than cast a dragon on turn 6 or 7.
So my question is this, like, on turn 5, you're in red, would you rather not just play, like, say, Stormbreath Dragon?
Yeah, and I think maybe this could be good in, like, a casual dragons deck where you can just cast all the dragons in your library and this ultimate is just a seal the deal.
Yeah. I just think, like, if they really wanted to push this guy, make him 4 mana, you could still play in 3 colors. Like, you gotta still, like, put some restrictions on it, but he either has to protect himself a little better, his ultimate has to be a little better, or he has to cost less. Like, there's a few too many ways to make him bad, basically.
Yeah, and you're saying take a notch off his mana cost, and generally that's a pretty big thing to say negatively about a Planeswalker. But when you've got 3 different color mana in the mana cost, the drawback in terms of mana is already very strong. This is much harder to cast than your run-of-the-mill 5 mana card that might be, 2 red and 3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, ultimately, I'm going with we will not see any of these in competitive Legacy events.
I agree, and if you do, it'll be a fluke and you'll never see it again. So,
on to cards that we actually think might have a little bit of playability then?
Yeah, so, I mean, since we're already in Planeswalkers, do you just want to talk about Narset?
Sure, we can skip to Narset. Narset is probably the most interesting from a Eternal point of view, and based on what my friends who play other formats say, one of the most interesting in general.
So let's talk about it. So art, not bad. 4 mana, 2 white, blue. So again, 4 mana for a Planeswalker. Okay, we're 2 colors. That's fine.
Control colors.
Yeah. So already we're in a good shape. Starting loyalty is 6, which is insane. I don't care what she does. Starting at 6 is good value. It means she's not dying to a bolt. She can probably survive. If she has a plus ability, she's surviving a Tarmogoyf attack. I like that already. So Sam, what's the first ability?
The first ability, +1. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand.
So, if you're playing this in a control deck, you're either bricking on a land, which is shitty, okay, but you're probably not playing many creatures, so you're probably going to hit some gas.
Well, in Legacy or Vintage, you're likely hitting either something that cantrips or selects cards, or counter magic.
With nothing wrong with either of those. So, +1. So going up to 7, getting another card, and passing on turn 4, I'm okay with that.
So here's my question, just off this ability, we can explore this a little more once we've gone through everything. Do I want to play Delver with this Planeswalker and just have, like, Delver, this Planeswalker, and a bunch of spells?
I don't think so.
I mean, Delver's a fine finisher. I guess,
It doesn't
we'll see.
flip
Let's
Delver.
talk about the other things it does.
Yeah.
Go for its next ability, Matt.
Okay, so -2. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell from your hand this turn, it gains Rebound. So as we talked about Rebound, that's where you exile and it comes back again. So, where does that matter? Okay, so it's turn 4. You cast Narset. The next one you play, so say you had 5 mana, whatever, you ramped. 5 mana, you play Swords of Plowshares, and it rebounds. So you get the Swords of Guy, so say they're attacker, so you actually can't kill Narset. Next time comes around, I think it's on the upkeep, or it might be on untap.
It is the upkeep. Important note real quick, the spell does have to resolve the first time around.
Yes, fair enough. So you get the Swords of Plowshares, and then on your upkeep, you get the Swords of Plowshares again. or you get to Brainstorm, and then Brainstorm again. I don't think in Legacy that there's any problem with that. Like, I mean, I guess the way they get around it is if you Swords to Plowshares, they, like, don't play out a creature, and then basically the Swords to Plowshares gets burned.
Oh, and I think that's fine, because then they haven't played their creature. And
yeah.
Then, the same thing with if you played, like, a Sweeper, like, great. If this card doesn't hit anything, you have chosen not to play a creature. I've still removed some of that damage, and I haven't given you the life that Swords to Plowshares would have given you, or like whatever else the spell would have done.
Like that tempo loss of having to like go into removal spell for an opponent, that's really shitty.
Yeah, and we'll talk again more about this because that ability is nuts. The ultimate, -9. So starting at 6, -9, not going to take a very long time to get to.
So again, that's 4 turns instead of 5, right?
You get an emblem with, your opponents can't cast non-creature spells.
So, is a Delver deck that great when it's just casting more Delvers? Maybe not. Because, I mean, assuming you're playing this in a control deck, you've got a pretty good handle probably on your opponent's creatures, and their spells are what basically is going to dig them out of their hole. Well, if you're saying, no, you're not casting any non-creatures, it's going to be pretty tough. Sam?
It's interesting how this just completely blanks some decks. Like, obviously, if you manage to ult with this, Storm isn't going to play the rest of the game. Dredge is not going to play the rest of the game against you. In Legacy, there's a bit more creatures, so this isn't that bad, but you might screw them. Like, if they Brainstorm, don't have a fetch out, and then you activate this, they are so screwed.
Yeah, like, I'm just wondering, is this... Like, Jace basically has Protection, Brainstorm, it has, and it's actually a kill. The only thing is this is not truly a kill. This is an advantage engine that would work well in conjunction with something else, but, like, unfortunately, like, -9 is not, your opponent loses the game.
Well, I'm still fine with that, because this -2 is just, I mean...
The -2 and the +1 are both really good.
The highest value thing you can do with -2 is probably Dig Through Time.
Oh, fuck, okay, yeah, that's pretty good.
Which means, 4 mana...
Because you don't have to worry about delving on the second go, right?
Because it's free, right.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So, 4 mana, -2, blue, get rid of some cards, and then over the course of 2 turns, look at 14 cards. If you're not winning after that, what have you done in your deck construction? Like, obviously, that is just actually insane.
Okay, so this could be supplemental, like, maybe in a white-blue control deck you're playing 3 Jace and 1 Narset. Or, I mean, whatever. I think she's quite good.
So, what is the worst commonly played spell in blue-white? The one that you most don't want to have Rebound?
Tough choice here. I want Swords. I guess it counters. Well, you would never, like, activate this and then, like, it turns out that the next spell is your Force of Will or whatever.
Right,
like,
because it's when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn.
Yeah, so it seems weird, like... There's no opportunity for your opponent to kind of get you, I think, with this. Because let's think about this. You activate this and you go to attack step or something, and your opponent is like, oh, kill your guy, and you have to Force a Will.
Yeah, okay. The only times I'm thinking is kill your guy and or activate a fetch land.
Yeah, like, I just think if you play it smart, you don't have to waste your Rebound on a useless spell. I think... As long as your spell resolves, it's probably going to be a Brainstorm, a Ponder, a Swords to Plowshares, a Dig Through Time, whatever.
So I think probably the worst commonly played spell, and so we're going to get rid of all counter spells because those probably aren't going to be what you're rebounding. The worst commonly played spells are probably Brainstorm if you didn't already have some sort of shuffle method up, because you're seeing 3 cards and then 1 more.
Yeah.
And after that, it's kind of hard to come up with something, really.
Yeah, like, I think
maybe Bolt, because at that point, Bolt may be a low-value option, but even then, if you Bolt their face, that's better than Swordsing nothing.
Yeah, I agree. Like, an empty Bolt is like, oh, oops, I got you for another, 6% of your life total or whatever, right? Like, sorry, 1/6, so 60%, but...
I'm not sure about Legacy with this. What I want to play this with, I mentioned Delver. I think where this could be potentially very interesting is a cantrip-heavy Monastery Mentor deck with tops so that you guarantee you're always drawing 2 cards a turn.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then every time you rebound, you're going to cast a spell, prowess all of your monks, you're going to get a new monk, and then you're going to do it again for free next turn.
Oh, Okay.
So I'm like 3 of these, 4 Monastery Mentors, like 4 tops, and then just cantrips, counterspells, and Swords to Plowshares.
You know what? That's not bad. The only thing I could say that would be like kind of is like turn 3 Mentor, turn 4 Narset, make a token, +1, basically get an extra card, and then you only quote go nuts, I think, like 2 turns after.
Well, if we're going to be in Magical Christmas Land, you go Monastery Mentor, Narset, -2 Gitaxian Probe.
Okay, yeah, I guess you'd be playing Probe. Okay, that's just fine. Yeah, there's no problem with that.
Which is, again, like, the value of seeing their hand twice, not that great. The value of drawing 2 cards, making
more
2 tokens, and yeah. So this is a card. I'm not sure though.
Would you put it on like a watch, like to watch? Maybe?
I will be, as soon as these are a little more affordable, picking up probably 2 or 3 of these to try out in a deck like I described. I don't know whether or not this will be good enough in Legacy. I think if it is, it would require something a lot different than we've already got.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So I think whoever actually designed this and designed the abilities, this is I'm actually quite fascinated by this card.
I think the closest existing Legacy deck to something that might play this would be a deck like Blue, White, Red Delver with no Stoneforge Mystics. Just like Delver, maybe a couple young Pyromancers.
Like Patriot Mentor, basically.
Yeah.
Which, you know what, you might actually see Mentor come into its own maybe more so with this card. But, time will tell.
Certainly, and another thing that I hadn't even considered, if you're playing this with Delver, you can play if you already have this out, you play your Delver, you look at the top card, you can know in advance whether or not you need to shuffle it away to try and get an instant or a sorcery to flip your Delver.
True.
There's so much that we can say about this card. One other little thing, the -2, it's when you cast it from your hand. So if you cast a spell from your hand on a Yawgmoth's Will turn, this gets exiled and comes back in your next turn, and then goes to your graveyard, instead of just being permanently exiled like it normally would on a Yawgmoth's Will turn.
Okay, relevant.
I don't know if this will ever get played in Esper Shell like that, but that's just one more little piece of value that all of these abilities have.
I have no problem with this card.
You mentioned that you liked the art. That's something I've seen a lot of people comment on. The art is a lot more classic than more recent sets have been. There's still a lot of CG, but it is at least more classic high fantasy, like you expect to see on a 1990s edition of The Hobbit or something.
Yeah, and I maybe haven't said this a lot on the cast, but I haven't been liking the CG art direction that we've been going in. It's just personal preference. Again, I played a long time ago. That's what playing 94. You're like, wow, look at these fantasy Magic cards, and now I'm just kind of this appeals to me.
All right, in under 30 seconds, on that note, new Thalia promo, yes or no?
Ugh.
Let's move along, shall we?
Okay.
From here on out, we're just going in alphabetical order, because that seems like a logical way to do this. The first card I've got is Anafenza, Kin Tree Spirit.
So, she is a 2/2 legendary spirit soldier for white, specifically. Sam?
Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, bolster 1.
So, again, you play, when it comes into play, enters the battlefield, so this could be off a vial, this could be off whatever. You bolster your tiniest creature, so whatever that may be. Where do you see this seeing some play? Obviously the white cost has me thinking Death and Taxes.
So I think double white is probably too much for Death and Taxes as the most popular build is run, because you're already running 4 Rashidun Ports, 4 Wasteland. That double white is going to be a bit difficult. On the flip side, you can just file this in, so I'm not sure. I would definitely put this on to watch, as you said, but where I could definitely see this seeing play is if you wanted to play a little bit more budget build. I think I've referred to this before as Death and Death, where it's just play more creatures, play more creatures, play more creatures. This seems real great. You go turn 1 Vial, Anafenza, Vial in a Mother of Runes. Now you've got a 2/2 Mother of Runes.
Yeah, and exactly. And most of the problem with that deck is the Zealous Persecution, Golgari Charm / whatever, my Mother of Runes, and the Mother of Runes lock is no longer complete. And having a 2/2 means if you need to, you can actually swing in with it for some value instead of dying to a Deathrite Shaman. Which, I'm not saying it's going to happen often, but even if your smallest creature is Anafenza, herself, I'm not averse to, like, getting a 3/3, like...
Certainly. One important thing to notice that is based on toughness, so if you play as Flicker Wisp is a 3/1, correct?
That's correct, so making it a 4/2 is mucho bueno.
Yes, definitely. From the sound of it, though, you think this could slot into the existing Death and Taxes builds with Rashid and Wasteland?
That's the thing. Does it fill a role that some other card doesn't do? Like, let's put it this way. Spirit of the Labyrinth currently is, I would say, almost not good enough for that deck. And, I mean, Death and Taxes, real players will probably contest, like, whether or not it is a good card or it isn't, because I'm no expert. I just don't think this improves a bad matchup enough to kind of do anything.
The slot that this is filling, I think, is Big Dumb Idiot Beater, which is not a slot that Death and Taxes has room for. This would be card number 61, 62, 63, I think, if that's what you're thinking of it as. On the flip side, though, like you said, again, I don't know, this definitely just on the borderline, because pumping up guys to get around Golgari Charm and all the other -1/-1 effects that are floating around right now is really great, especially when you consider you could do something like Golgari Charm. You
in response, violin.
Response violin something, and now your one other dude is saved and your Anafenza is saved. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there might be better cards to deal with, say, Zealous Persecution or whatever. I mean, the deck is already running very tight on slots. Like, you're always wondering, like, how many Serra Avenger do I run? How many Thalia? How many Spirit of the Labyrinth? Am I running them at all, or are they in the board? Yeah, I just don't think it's quite cutting it.
The ability doesn't do enough for the rest of the deck's game plan, essentially.
If you could bolster 2 creatures, or it put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, I think it would be good enough. I think here it's just not quite.
One important thing to note, it is legendary, and Death and Taxes tends to play, 2 or 3 Caracas?
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Which also means that you can block, take this out, put it back in.
Yeah. Even then. I mean, then you also get the problem of, like, I have all these legendary creatures, so I only can have one out of... Like, it's... what are you going to run, all legendary creatures? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So we're going with possible, but just barely not good enough?
More likely a budget option, however, maybe somebody in Death and Taxes will break this card. I don't think it's that broken.
I think if this card is going to be broken, it's going to be through the use of viling things in a lot. So maybe cutting the average converted mana cost down to where you're viling in, 1 and 2 drops every single turn.
Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Interesting. All right, here's one that you wanted to put on the list. I will say the card, and then I'll let you read it. Assault Formation.
So it is a 1 in green enchantment. So 1 in a green enchantment. Survival of the Fittest. Maybe? No. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So for 2 mana, this is Doran. Alright. Doran did see some play by me during Trina Nemesis' kind of, real reign of when it was really popular in the format, because a 1/1 Trina Nemesis is whatever. Nobody gives a fuck. Your thoughts on just that ability?
Doran has always been a card that people have wanted to play. I believe it's a little more of a thing in Modern, where, if your Goyf is a 6/7 and their Goyf is a 6/7, but your Goyf is attacking for 7 instead of 6, that's real good value.
Yeah, but see, if you remember, Doran is actually a symmetrical effect, so Goyf's trade...
This is not, though.
Exactly. So
that's what
the
I'm
point
saying.
is, your 6/7 Tarmogoyf is strictly better than their 6/7 Tarmogoyf. So, I like that. That's a plus. Your Death Ray Shamans are 2/2s, your Stoneforge Mystics, your Dark Confluence are a little worse. Whatever. Right? So that seems okay. Is it worth 4 slots in the deck with just this ability? Probably not.
Again, I would call that card 61 or 62.
But let's read the other abilities. Green. Target creature with Defender can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. Okay. So that means basically, this is like Rolling Stones for 1 green. So basically walls can attack. Because there's not, there are cards with Defender, but a lot of them are walls, and I'm going to call them walls, so too bad. But if you notice, a lot of the walls have very large toughnesses and small powers. So if I can make, say, a Living Wall, or say Wall of Junk, a 0/7, right, for 2 mana, suddenly it swings for 7 for 1 green. I find that okay.
The most obvious use of this, again, looking at existing decks, would be Wall of Roots, and giving yourself an awesome mana advantage while having an effectively 5/5.
Yeah, or even 4/4 if you've used it once. 4/4 is nothing to sneeze at either.
Certainly. And then, this is, I think, the type of ability that could potentially lead to, like, a Tier 2 Defender's deck. With, like, play like this, Wall of Roots, Wall of Omens.
Wall of Blossoms for card draw.
Yeah, and just have a bunch of value and then let them swing in for 5 a turn. And
yeah, and they make really good blockers, right? So, I mean, even if you're not activating the defender, you use some as on defense, some on offense, like, that seems okay.
Can you imagine, like, turn 2, Wall of Roots, turn 3, Assault Formation, activate. Your opponent just went from, Wall of Roots, sweet, to, oh shit.
Yes. Like, I mean, I guess Abrupt Decay is always going to be a card, so there's nothing you can do, but, like, I obviously just want to play, like, Wall of Junk in a Junk deck, and just be like, swing for 7, get you. Like, that's, if you don't know Wall of Junk, maybe it's an EDH card, I don't know. It's a card I opened up back in the day.
Wall of Junk, 2 mana, artifact creature, 0/7, whenever Wall of Junk blocks, return it to its owner's hand at the end of combat.
So, obviously, when it's a 7/7, you're not doing a whole ton of blocking. Unless you really need to. So
it's also a 2 mana 7/7.
Yeah, which is...
It's a Termagoyf that's a 7/7 on turn 2.
Yeah, so I might be okay with this. The third ability is 2 and a green, creatures you control get +0/+1 until end of turn. So effectively, this is your creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. Thoughts? I mean, I think 3 mana is a lot. I don't think I'm going to, like, want to sit there with this on board and be like, oh yeah, pump my toughness by...
Where this seems awesome, I think, is if you've got, like, 2 Wall of Roots, and now you're paying green, give your Wall of Roots -1/-1, repump them, but also pump the rest of the team.
Yeah, that seems fine. Or, like, in response to a wipe your 1/1s out, right? Like, so say Lingering Souls, right? Well, if they're all 1/1s for 3, then suddenly, all of a sudden, they're all basically 2/1s.
Are you playing this in a deck with many 1/1s, though?
Maybe, maybe not.
I think where you're activating this ability more frequently is against Pyroclasm.
But my point still remains.
Yeah. So this makes me want to give you some homework and say that by the time we publish this, you should write up a rudimentary Walls deck list.
I can do that.
All right.
Next.
This is another one you asked to put on there, so Display of Dominance. Go ahead and read it for us.
All right, Display of Dominance. Shitty Art 101. 1 in a green, uncommon, instant. So, 2 modes. Mode 1, destroy target blue or black non-creature permanent. So let's discuss that. So what are some blue or black non-creature permanents in Legacy? Well...
Counterbalance, but being 2 mana is going to be a little rough on this card.
Okay, so let's put it on the list. Counterbalance, Liliana the Veil, Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Narset?
Sure, Narset, Omniscience.
Are there that many blue and black enchantments? I suppose...
Animate Dead.
Animate Dead, that's real...
One of.
That's really reaching for it in terms of this being good, though.
Yeah. However, there are some... I mean, are there any hate cards that are target black or blue non-creature permanents? I mean, Engineered Plague, Threads of Disloyalty. I mean, there are some definite playables.
I think at this mana cost, you're better off, for the most part, probably just playing Abrupt Decay. There's a few cases where you're not, which is where you're playing against cards that, cost $1 million. But I think most of the time Abrupt Decay is going to do this job a little better.
Yeah, so I think the only cases where Abrupt Decay isn't doing the job is... I mean, this only targets non-creatures. I think if it were destroy target black or blue permanent, I think that could be a problem.
That would be Pyroblast that can hit one other thing, not in red. Yes.
So I think that would be that would be maybe pushing it too far, but at 2 mana it's still fine. Maybe. We'll see. Point being, it kills, I think what you really have to think about is that it kills both Liliana and Jace, but more importantly, Jace the Mind Sculptor in this color. So, it's an instant speed spell. Let me repeat that. It's an instant speed spell that kills Jace the Mind Sculptor. The problem with a lot of these decks, especially green decks that are not playing red, is they play Jace the Mind Sculptor and they go Brainstorm. And sure, you might have Maelstrom Pulse, you might have whatever in hand, but in that Brainstorm, they will have drawn an answer to your answer.
Or they don't go Brainstorm, they go Bounce, and you're never able to effectively keep a threat on board for the rest of the game.
Exactly. And that's never fun. So, okay, so destroying Jace before they get the chance to draw cards is pretty important. Destroying Jace in general, and instant speed, because what were your options before? Beast Within? Like, I'm just trying to think of, like, instant speed, destroy target Jace.
Yeah, in green, not much.
In not red.
In not red, yeah, not a lot.
Not a hell of a lot. We're kind of dry there. So, okay, that's the first mode. Second mode. Permanents you control can't be targets of blue or black spells your opponents control this turn. So what are some blue or black spells that your opponents could play, Sam?
The big thing I'm thinking of is when playing against a big blue deck that instead of having removal is going to have lots of bounce to attempt to shove their way through.
Yeah, so cards like that could be Repeal, Chain of Vapor,
Echoing Truth.
Unfortunately, can't do anything against the old...
Hurkyl's Recall can't do anything against, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's a few cards that get through this.
I think one important thing to note, as this is an instant, effectively what you're going to probably do with this is use it as a counter spell. You're not going to go like, oh, and I'll give my stuff protection. You're going to say, oh, you Echoing Truth? I will effectively counter that.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting for the few cases where basically your opponent is not playing Wipe Away. But like against Omnitel. So let's look at this card in kind of maybe that perspective first. Like, it kills Omniscience. It stops a Slaughter Pact or an Echoing Truth. It doesn't stop Wipe Away, fine. But you could also, if they Cunning Wish, you can go Response, Display of Dominance, your, like, say, Lock Piece, which is example, Gaddock. So then what are they doing? Well, are they waiting another turn? Yeah, but if you need a turn, then maybe that's all you need.
I think everything you've listed is fine, but it's just fine. It's fine at its best.
But we forgot that one spell that's played a lot. You just talked about it. Abrupt Decay. So in the Abrupt Decay mirror, what do you want to do? You want to stop Abrupt Decay, because Abrupt Decay real good, and you don't have any misdirection effects generally when you're playing these mirror matches. I mean, sure, like if it's Bug versus Junk or Bug versus Jund, neither of those decks they're not playing Divert, or at least they're not playing a lot of Divert. So what do? Well, they Abrupt Decay your Tarmogoyf, and then they have Tarmogoyf, and that's real awkward. But if you can blank a piece of removal, like there's nothing wrong with that. You get to kill their Liliana, whatever that may be. I think it's really interesting. I don't think it's the best card ever printed.
Certainly.
I just think it has play, and it does fill a gap that this color has been looking for, which is instant speed Jace Destruction.
All right, interesting. Yeah, it's not a color combination I play a lot. One of my thoughts when you say, protecting your Goyf is for the same amount of mana, you could just play a second one. But then you worry if, there are in Bug, they could counter it, or, you can't have 8 Tarmogoyfs.
Well, you can, but then you're cheating, so. So I would say this is unlikely to see widespread play, might see it a little bit.
All right.
I mean, what about, one last word, what about Infect, right? Infect always worries about, keeping their 1 or 2 guys on board, and Abrupt Decay is always a huge problem, right? Because if you just, Abrupt Decay their guy and you don't have Vines of Vastwood, or if you have to waste Vines of Vastwood on your turn to try and counter it, maybe that's no good.
So Vines of Vastwood, number 5, essentially?
Maybe. Also, this art is fucking awful. I'm going to say it one more time. Look at it, it's garbage. I'm pretty sure if I were to get this card and play it a lot, I might get altered copies of it. Because I don't care what language you're pimping in, this just looks like shit. Absolute garbage.
So I'm looking at the face, looks like how Disney would have animated a Middle Eastern person anytime before, 2000.
Big Trouble in Little China?
Fangs, black beard. All right, then he's got, some sort of hat on that has the horns that are stylized like Nicol.
Yeah.
He's wearing kind of the kind of outfit that the 3 ninjas were wearing in those excellent films from my childhood. And then his skin is
like
tiger skin.
Yeah. So I don't even know what's going on here, or it looks like...
And he's throwing pink goo from Ghostbusters 2 at a guy with a knife in his hand.
Who also has tiger skin arm bands, something. Like the only thing was Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China kind of was my initial thought process when I saw this card.
All right, let's move on before we offend a whole bunch of our listeners.
All right, next.
Graceblade Artisan. Graceblade Artisan, 2 and a white, creature, human, monk. Human, always a nice subtype to be. 2/3. It gets +2/+2 for all auras attached to it. Or sorry, for each aura attached to it.
I'm okay. Okay, so a 2/3 for 3 is not great. Let's be real. There are
Certainly.
better power toughnesses for that cost.
Obviously, you're playing this with a bunch of auras. In Legacy, think back 3 or 4 years, blouses.
Yep, blouses.
But this has no protection, which is going to be real rough when you go to equip and they bolt this. Or when you go to enchant and they bolt this.
Yeah, or they just abrupt decay you into oblivion and you lose all those auras anyway.
And then there's a blouses-esque deck in Modern, isn't there?
Maybe. That's the fucking...
Daybreak Coronet, $50 or something.
Yeah, sure. I don't think it's terrible. Like, sure, you get to... Like, what am I going to put on Imperial armor? Like, I don't know. I just don't see this card being...
If it were to be played, it would be in a deck like that. I don't think a deck like that's going to happen.
And I don't think that, like, this is the card they were looking for, like, oh my god, Wizards printed this card, thank god. No, whatever. Like, I like it, it's flavorful, it's not Legacy playable.
Alright, here's a real fun one. Hedonist Trove. That's Hedonist 'S. My text.
Did you say Hedonist?
What is it? Zombie.
The chocolate frosting. Yeah.
5 black. Enchantment.
Bad. So that's what I thought when I first saw this card. So it better win me the game, basically, is what I thought.
Well, when Hedonist Trove enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard.
Okay, so, Lead Line of the Void. I don't like that, like, so what, I get the Rest in Peace ability, or, like, Slash, and they don't get to have a graveyard. Cool. Alright, so that ability's garbage.
You may play land cards exiled with Hedonist Trove.
I'm at 7 mana, that doesn't win me the game. Alright.
You may cast non-land cards exiled with Hedonist Trove. You can't cast more than one spell this way each turn. So each turn, you can cast one of the spells that you exiled.
So I get to play the lands that they had, and then I get to cast their spells. So I still don't win.
This is obviously a very powerful effect. The reason I wanted to bring this up is on the So Many Insane Plays podcast, I talked about this. This would obviously be nuts at a much lower cost. The question is, where's the cost where this is okay to exist, but not, like, restrictable?
Okay, so let's think about it. So, like, if the cost is too low, like, say this is a 1 mana card, like, you wouldn't want to play it on turn 1 because they have no graveyard. You don't get, like, there's no value in it.
I think you can't start lower than 3.
I agree. I think, like, 1 black or even black is excellent. So, the only thing is this. You have to remember this is not a continuous effect, right? It just basically, it takes a snapshot of their graveyard at that current time and says, now play from these. So they can still refill up their graveyard, but if you were to play 4 of these, well then yeah, obviously then you get the next. I think 3 mana is... Would you play it in Legacy? Like...
I don't know about Legacy. Where I'm thinking about this in Vintage is... You turn off their Yawgmoth's Will turn, or you turn it off if they're preparing for one. If they have gifted before your turn ends and you have the ability to cast this, you get to put the best cards in their gifts pile in the graveyard, and then you get to have them. That's fantastic.
Like, I just think, like, 7 mana, way too much. 3 mana, playable?
Well, the other interesting thing is, I think 3 mana, it depends how that mana is arranged, because if that's, like, black and 2, that's pretty
black
nuts.
And 2.
Well, but at the same time, this can be so easily countered by instant speed delve. Like,
yes, it's
I
true.
play Hedonist Trove.
Okay,
in response, I'm going to empty my graveyard, and you will have a dig through time that you can play with.
Yeah, okay, that's a good counterpoint, but, like, I think if you're assuming that they're always going to have the dig through time to counter the Hedonist Trove, maybe you're wrong. So I think maybe making this 1 black, like a Phyrexian Arena mana cost, or a Liliana mana cost,
hey, you know
fair.
Where this gets real nuts is when they're playing Gush and you're playing Fast Bond, and you get to add a 5th Gush to your deck.
Oof. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Or if you counter their Yawgmoth's Will, and then you get to Yawgmoth's Will with their Yawgmoth's Will.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think we agree that 3 mana becomes very playable. 4 mana? I think in Legacy, I don't want this at 4 mana. Like, again, I hold the standard of, like, are you Jacing? Are you Siege Rhinoing? Like, what are you doing to affect the game state?
So I have an idea where this could go at 4 mana, but it's not good, and that's if you played a deck that's like 50% like Pox, where you're just ripping apart their hand, and then you just use their win conditions to end the game.
Interesting thought process.
I mean, like, you go like Thoughtseize you, get a Delver, him you, get a couple things, maybe him you again, or hit you with Hypnotic Spectre, and then once I've got a few things built up there, alright, I'll start taking those back one at a time, and just slowly kill you with your own guys. Which, probably not going to be very good. It'll be really fun, though.
Yeah, I mean, the name is pretty great. Like, I would have preferred Hedonism Bot, and I think if I were, like, really all in on playing this card, like, there's definitely a Hedonism Bot altar in here.
With the name combined with the art on this card is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I like this, like...
It's basically one of the treasure rooms from Aladdin, with 2 guys carrying the treasure, and a giant dragon in the background, like, yes, this is my treasure.
Like, excuse me, what you doing here? Like,
just, that treasure goes over there.
The dragon,
this treasure goes in this corner.
Like, I think the line for the dragon could be like, excuse me, I haven't finished vomiting yet.
No, and the treasure needs to go in that corner. It's better feng shui. So, at 7 mana, I mean, you're probably having to show and tell this in, and if you're show and telling this in instead of Griselbrand, or Emrakul, or Sneak Attack, or Omniscience...
I mean, I think just pushing black enchantments would be interesting. Like, black doesn't have a lot going for it in a lot of formats, except for, like, the few powerful cards. Like, in Vintage, why do you play black? Because of Yogg-Will, because of Vamp Tutor, because of Demonic Tutor. Maybe you're still playing
Tendrils of Agony.
And Tendrils of... Like, but you don't have a coherent game plan. Those are just, like, I splash black for good things.
And Bob. The control decks have black for a little more stuff, like Dark Confidant, Dreadbore, Leyline of the Void being castable. But in general,
like, it's not a primary color that you're like, I'm building a black deck with
yeah, you certainly
splash.
don't start in black.
Yeah, so, anyway, I think this card is too much and will not see play at this mana cost.
But, yeah, wanted to talk about it. It's a super interesting effect.
Yeah, agreed.
Great to see them pushing things. This would obviously be completely nutty in a format like EDH, where you're getting up to a zillion mana and everybody's casting completely insane cards.
Yeah, I guess I mean, people who enjoy EDH, go for it.
Let's not get on that today.
Yeah, I think if you enjoy EDH, this would probably be a great card for you. Moving on.
Alright, Living Lore.
So it is a 4-mana creature that looks like, I don't know.
Let's say it's 3 and a blue, not just 4 mana.
Yeah, 3 and a blue. It's a star. It's a creature avatar. The art is toilet paper in the wind over a tree.
It looks like something from Burning Man.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's read it. As Living Lore enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Well, that should be easy to do in blue. Living Lore's power and toughness are each equal to the exiled card's converted mana cost. Alright, that can get really nuts really fast.
Yeah, so as long as it's not Brainstorm, it's okay.
Yeah, if it's Brainstorm, it's okay. If it's Dig Through Time, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Whenever Living Lore deals combat damage, you may sacrifice it. If you do, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost.
So what's your low end? Your low end is obviously bricking for some reason and hitting nothing.
Well, you're not casting this if you're hitting nothing.
Well, no, say they, like, on the stack, like, Nihil Spellbomb you, like, yeah, okay, that's obviously the dirt.
Well, if they have Nihil Spellbomb, it's already in play, so you probably aren't
fine.
into it.
Ravenous Trap. Whatever, fuck you, Sam. Like,
Ravenous Trap? What have you been doing, putting 3 cards in the graveyard before this that you have 1,000,000 mana?
Anyway, point being. So what's, like, your low end is obviously Brainstorm or something, a 1/1, where it becomes no good. What's your high end? Dig Through Time.
Probably Dig Through Time. So then the question is kind of a mix of where is the line for when you want to cast? Like, if they have a spell that is almost but not quite a gonna kill you spell, do you sacrifice it and, like, say, Dig Through Time or Treasure Cruise or Brainstorm? Or, I'm talking more about the high-end cards like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. Or do you just keep beating them with a really big guy for 4 mana?
Yeah, like, it seems like, at least in my mind, you can't Abrupt Decay this, so you're Source of Plowsharing it, and if you play your cards right, this thing is never getting bolted. So, because I assume you're going to be playing this in a deck with, like, multiple either Dig Through Times or something relevant so that you're not dying to, like, you're not, like, exiling Abrupt Decay so I have a fucking 2/2, like, big deal.
Another important thing, this does not have to deal combat damage to a player. It just has to get chump blocked or chump block. You can do this in their turn.
But again, ideally, you go with Dig Through Time, you have a fucking 8/8, and then you're like, oh...
You're feeling real good.
You're feeling real good, and then you're like, oh, my 8/8 can't get through. Okay, well, fuck your chump blocker, and then I'm just gonna, deal damage Dig Through Time. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because this has the potential to open a lot of really interesting lines of play when you have to start comparing some less powerful cards. Like when this is a 1/1, do you just immediately crack it to Brainstorm, or do you chip away at their life total? Obviously, it depends on what they've got going on.
Yeah, and that could really depend. Like, say they have an open board for a few turns, and you're like, 1U, and then they're like, oh, I have Mishra's Factory. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, I'm just going to run it into you anyway, and then we get to Brainstorm.
Oh, and let's talk about also, if you've got something that will wrath their board, they're never going to attack into it. Like, if they're playing a Young Pyromancer deck, and you've got Pyroclasm on this guy, they're not going to attack you.
What if you... Okay, think of it this way. I don't think you'd want to play it, but... Okay, you Terminus. You cast Living Lore, so it's a 6/6. You beat in, and at some point you're like, oh, they just, muck me next turn. Attack Terminus. I would be okay with that. Terminus is also not a bad call there.
So the way you're describing it, it sounds like this is a potential thing. Maybe could be played as another finisher in a Miracles deck.
Yeah,
because you're gonna be putting Terminus into the graveyard real early in that, or early relative to the game plan.
In a lot of matchups where you're wanting to Terminus, I don't think the Elves matchup is bad at all. Don't get me wrong, but say the creature mid-rangey matchup, and they board out the removal, and you board in a Living Lore. I don't think this is ideal. Don't get me wrong, but you cast Living Lore, removing the Terminus. It's a 6/6. Well, mid-range deck probably remove their Swords to Plowshares. Oh, now it's a 6/6. Great. So they start to overextend because they have to, because it's a 6/6, and then all of a sudden you bust it and you Terminus them and set them back again. And if it's, you have to sacrifice it, but whatever.
Another point, if you're using a lower end spell like Lightning Bolt or Swords to Plowshares against a deck that has lots of little dudes, like Elves, any kind of deck playing lots of tokens, Death and Taxes, you're going to be able to 2-for-1 them in that you're going to, when you want to block, sacrifice Swords or Bolt another dude, taking the guy that you blocked with you.
Yeah. I think this is one of those cards where I'm like, wow, this took a lot of design. This is interesting in a design sense. Whether it's actually good enough is up for debate, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what we're here for. We're here to debate it.
I think I would try it. I don't think it fills any particular slot well enough. It doesn't improve a matchup in a lot of the decks that I'm at least thinking of off the top of my head. Maybe in a bug mid-range deck where you're a singular Living Lore. Maybe my Dig Through Time. Maybe I get to live the dream. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, move on again?
Yep.
So, the third in a recent series of Grow creatures, Myth Realized. Not actually a creature, interestingly. Let's go through it real quick. Myth Realized is 1 white enchantment.
So overall, that's I see. This is playable. It's 1 mana.
Yeah, it's already on the radar. It's a 1 mana rare. It's probably a little okay.
Okay.
Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a lore counter on Myth Realized. So that's effectively prowess.
Yep. So then 2 and a white, colon. That also puts a lore counter on it. So say end of turn, I have some mana kicking around, I can load this thing up with tokens. So that seems okay.
And then 1 white, until end of turn, Myth Realized becomes a monk avatar creature in addition to its other types, and gains this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lore counters on it.
Initially?
Well, and one of the things here, you're looking at casting this turn 1, playing a bunch of cantrips, and then effectively having a Monastery Mentor that doesn't create tokens, but it's much harder to remove.
Yeah, so the only thing that I think about it is like this. Sure, at some point this thing becomes a 5/5/6/6, whatever. And then you attack with it. But in game 1, all the removal on it is live. They can just decay it when you choose to activate it. They can Swords to Plowshares it once it becomes active.
It dies to enchantment removal, which is additional removal that it ties to. It also, in Vintage, it can get misstep because it's at 1.
Yeah, so I think it's really tough to say that, So, okay, if it had Shroud, is it playable? Sure, yeah, obviously.
Essentially, if it were more difficult to remove.
But currently, it's really not.
So, I want to mention, I said that I played in a sealed event the other day. I played Myth Realize, and let me tell you, playing Myth Realize on turn 1, granted that's a much lower power level format, man, it felt real good. Especially in, like, turn 1 Myth Realize, turn 2 there's a almost forked bolt, turn 3 negate, turn 4 start killing you.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're playing this in a not very threat-heavy deck, and you're just using a lot of, like, say, cantrips and removal spells, like, this thing will get big quickly, and then if you have enough counterspells in your deck, you're just, like, countering that removal. Unfortunately, like in Legacy, Abrupt Decay, Abrupt Decay, Abrupt Decay, out of the board, like, Wear Tear, more Abrupt Decay, Crossing Grip, Pithing, like, there's a lot of cards that hit this, and I'm not sure it's good enough. I know the Miracles thread was talking about it, and it was quickly dismissed.
Well, and I think the reason that a lot of control decks are talking about it is because a lot of control decks, their turn 1 play is generally something like a cantrip. So this
or just land go.
So this is doing something on the first turn. It's being a little more proactive. I think where I find this really interesting is in Landstill, where you play this turn 1,
yes,
you play Standstill turn 2, and you can just keep pumping it up every turn. You didn't do anything this turn because you don't want me to Ancestral Recall? I'll put a token on it.
I agree in that sense that, like, it survives sweepers, like, you just, like, Supreme Verdict. Great. All your stuff dies, I'm still sitting here getting tokens. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think the problem this would have potentially being played in Vintage is that with Young Pyromancer and Monastery Mentor running around now, there's a lot more actual creature removal, especially in the form of Swords to Plowshares, which is creature removal that will always be able to hit this when it's a creature. Whereas, Bolt, if it's a 3/3, they bolt and you're just like, Brainstorm, your bolt doesn't kill it.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it doesn't have any evasion, so, like, if there's a lot of tokens kicking around, it's like, you're 8/8 Myth Realized, great, chump with Elemental, kill you on the backswing.
Both of those things bring up the point that the grow creatures in the last couple years, which is mostly, Monastery Mentor and Young Pyromancer, they grow wide, not just large, because growing large doesn't help you when they can chump block every turn, or when they have a removal spell that hits one card.
Yeah, like if this had, like, Thorn Elemental ability, like, or Trample, or even, like, Flying, or whatever. If this was, like, Thorn Elemental, like, so, like, it can be blocked, but it just deals all its damage to the player if you wanted to, like, that would be pretty good. But it doesn't, so...
Another problem it will have in Vintage is being an enchantment. There is enchantment hate in Vintage because of Oath of Druids. So there's a lot of ways to get rid of this, which is the concern about whether or not it'll be playable. I'm definitely going to try it because it has the ability to get real nuts. The fact that it is only a creature on the turn you want it to be means that Jace can't bounce it, means most sweepers are sorceries, though they won't take care of it. So it's got a lot of upside, especially in terms of them not being able to take care of it, especially in Vintage, where there's not that much removal. Like, I talked a lot about it being easily removed, but there's not that much removal.
I mean, in Legacy, I think there's a lot more removal.
Certainly.
So, overall, possible.
Another point is, at 1 white and then starting to grow, I think the default thing to think about would be a tempo deck. But you don't want to play in it with a tempo deck that burns 1 white to make its creature, especially if you need to block. So now you're burning a white on each, on the top and bottom of every turn. And if you want to grow the thing manually, it costs 3 mana. That's a lot in the type of deck we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to move on to the next one?
I'll definitely be trying it. What do you think, though? How much do you think we'll be seeing of Myth Realized?
In Legacy, not much. I think the only deck that has a very good shot of breaking this is Landstill, like, for the reasons you discussed.
Alright.
Because it slides nicely under Standstill.
Well, especially, not only does it slide under Standstill, anytime that Standstill is not on board, you're going to be casting a lot of spells because you've probably just drawn 3, or you've been draw-going for several turns.
Exactly.
So, yeah, definitely playable. Maybe not going to see a lot of play, though.
Agreed.
Alright. Virulent Plague. 2 and a black, enchantment, creature tokens get -2/-2. The obvious utility is, again, interestingly, we're been very vintage heavy in the discussion so far, is that this completely stops both Monastery Mentor tokens and Young Pyromancer tokens. It also stops Spirit tokens that Oath is going to be giving you.
Yeah, so what card also has this kind of ability? Well, Illness in the ranks. So Illness is actually 1 black, but all creature tokens get -1/-1. So the question is, when do you want -2/-2? So -1/-1 matters in that every token that's relevant right now, Lingering Souls, Monastery Mentor, Young Pyromancer, they're all 1/1 tokens. Now, obviously the Mentor tokens have prowess, but at end turn, the prowess will go away. They will die. So I'm wondering, do you need -2/-2?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think of where you would want this. Now, one interesting point is there are a few other tokens in Legacy and Vintage. The big one is Batterskull, and having Batterskull permanently be a 2/2 is not irrelevant.
No, I agree. I mean, it's not irrelevant, but it's not...
It's not great either.
I think for 3 mana, it's a little much. I think if this were 2 mana, maybe I'd say, oh, sure. But it still doesn't hit, a lot of stuff, especially in Legacy. What is it? It's not hitting all of the normal creatures, right? I mean, more normal creatures are played more so than tokens. And
yeah, there's not a lot of tokens. The other, besides Batterskull, the other most common token type is probably Angels, which are 4/4s. And again, that's not irrelevant, because turning their 3 or 4 4/4s into 2/2s is going to buy you an extra turn or 2 or maybe 3.
It doubles their clock, essentially. They have to do twice as many attacks to get the same amount of damage in. The question is, would I rather, for the majority of the time, just do it at 1 mana? And I think the answer is generally yes. Where do you want -2/-2? Zombie tokens out of, Dredge. Garruk Relentless produces 2/2 tokens. When not flipped, Primal Hunter produces 3/3 beasts, I think. There's a few times when you produce bigger tokens.
I think Dredge in both formats is the most relevant of those.
Yeah, so the question is, do you want to spend 3 mana doing that, though? I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah,
you're probably at 2 and a black, you're probably better off Engineered Plague and running 2 of them and playing both of them. Right.
Most of the time, Zealous Persecution is going to do you just fine. I mean, obviously not the same as in response to the prowess trigger, you're still getting fucked. But, my point still stands. I'd rather have Illness in the ranks, and how much do I want Illness in the ranks? Not that much.
All right. And then I've got one last card here.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and admit this is pretty borderline. Zurgo Bellstriker. 1 red. It is a legendary creature Orc Warrior. 2/2. It cannot block creatures with power 2 or greater. It has dash for 1 and a red, which is haste, and it can attack immediately, but then you bounce it. So my question was, would you rather play this as a 2/2, it not have haste, but also not give them the card from Goblin Guide all the time?
I don't know.
Its drawback is that in that comparison, the drawback is not immediate damage, but over the course of a game, Goblin Guide is going to give them 2 or 3 or 4 cards. I think you also have to weigh the value of the knowledge that you gain of the top of their deck.
I like knowledge. I don't think this guy's actually that good, because, can't block creatures power 2 or greater, so fine, yeah, he's not chump blocking. Does blocking a 1/1 matter? Maybe.
Was Goblin Guide blocking a whole lot, though?
No, he wasn't. He could. If he could, that's the whole point, right? But you're all about getting in there. He doesn't have haste on turn 1, though. That's the problem. You're playing him and then passing. You have to go turn 2, get you. So, in a way, how are you using your mana effectively? Because if you play this guy on turn 1, right, he doesn't have haste, so then you pass. So with Goblin Guide, you could have done 2 damage. When you get to your second turn, you have to play this guy. So you're dealt 4 damage with Goblin Guide, and you dealt 2 damage with this guy, whether or not you played him for his dash cost, or if you just... Do you know what I mean?
Sure, but you're only talking about the first 2 turns. When you go over, 3 or 4 or 5 turns, the difference becomes much smaller.
But in a burn spell, I want to be using my mana... I want to... if I'm going to play a creature, I want to set it and forget it, right? I want to just be creature, use my mana on the next turn for either more creatures or more burn spells, and haven't used...
And I'm not talking about dashing this. I'm talking about putting this into play turn 1 and just not attacking on the first turn.
Oh, sorry. I think he's fine. I don't know if he's... I like the information from Goblin Guide, though.
Okay. Yeah, I think the information is more valuable than the fact that they're gaining lands.
Yeah, I don't think I ever won a game.
I think the 2 damage is, like, the difference in the 2 damage is actually less relevant than the information gained from Goblin Guide.
Yeah, like, I don't think I've ever actually won a game against Burn solely on the back of, like, their Goblin Guide drew me into the land that I needed to beat them. It was usually, I was either blown out by their burn spells and just, like, locked out that way, or I won because I'm like, oh, turn 3 timely reinforcements. I just set back, like, your 3 turns of trying to do stuff. Have fun. Like, do you know what I mean? I just don't think this does quite enough, and the information is, I think, really good to know.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, that was one more borderline. It's in fact, when you look at Mythic Spoiler, they compare it to other cards, and the first one listed is Goblin Guide.
Wow. Moving on to one that I wanted to discuss, I think, which are not really playable in Legacy or Vintage. The dragons. So, specifically the Dragonlords. So, there's basically allied colors, a bunch of different ones. They range from powers of like 3 up to 8, and toughnesses ranging from 4 till 8. They're big dumb beaters. They cost anywhere from between 5 and 7. I don't think there's anything relevant in basically all of them.
A lot of them do have relevant abilities, but being 6 mana, there are much better things you could be doing.
Yeah, so like, I'd like to go through each of the dragons and like say like why this is no good. So like,
okay, all of them cost like 5.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. So Dromoka is the green-white, so like we'll call it Maverick Dragon, right? Can't be countered. Okay, you play
Solid.
Thrun. You play Thrun because Thrun can't be countered. Great, wonderful. So that's a good ability. 5/7, also good power toughness combo. Wonderful. Flying and lifelink. Evasion, lifelink, 5 life a turn. Hey, I'm okay with that. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. What would they be casting? Terminus. Great. I've avoided Terminus.
Removal and counter spells.
Yeah, so that's good. You know what's also really cool is when they Swords to Plowshares on their turn.
Yeah.
And you fucking die in a fire.
It's a minor tempo difference.
Yeah, so the minor tempo difference for the control deck, they don't give a shit. Can't be countered is relevant, but not having protection is super relevant, especially when you're investing so much in a creature. If this could not be countered hexproof, I'd be in on this card like you could not believe. Thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, all of the abilities that these have are pretty relevant, but 6 mana is just so much.
Yeah. Like I said, at hexproof, or even Shroud, so I can attach some equipment to it. I'll let you have that. Okay? At Shroud, I'll play this card for 6 mana because she basically replaces, Dragon replaces, Dragons of Gender? I don't know. Anyway, this dragon would replace Sigarda in a green-white X control deck.
Yeah, and not a lot of Sigarda
No,
that I've seen.
I'm pretty sure, I'm one of the only people playing Sigarda. So, anyway. Moving on to the next one. Sam?
Dragonlords Ajutai. 3 white, blue. 5/4. It's an Elder Dragon, which is neat. Flying. It has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Kind of hard to know how valuable that is, given that a 5/4 probably wants to be tapped a lot. Yeah. Whenever Dragonlord Ajutai, I'm certain I'm pronouncing that wrong, deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest on bottom in any order, which is Anticipate from this set, or very slightly worse Impulse.
Yeah.
So, again, hexproof, great. Flying 5/4, great. Looking at the top 3 cards every turn,
except
great.
When you're attacking to get the ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
And also 5 mana.
Yeah, no. So, I actually really like Dragonlord Silumgar, or whatever his name is, because he has Tasigur around his neck as a necklace.
I've already seen somebody's making something like that necklace on Etsy.
So that's you know what? I don't care what else happens. That's pretty cool. It doesn't mean it's playable, though, because it's certainly not. Flying Death Touch 3/5 for 4 in Dimir colors. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature or planeswalker for as long as you control Silumgar. So, the chances of you stealing a Jace the Mind Sculptor are, I'm going to say, near 0. like, I guess, like, you have to win the lottery sometime, and, like, your opponent has straight nothing.
And your opponent has been brainstorming and not hitting something to take care of you playing this guy.
And I guess at that point, Llanowar Elves wins the game. But, yeah, I guess you get to play this, too. Like, this is okay. Overall, like, if you want to live the dream, you play this card, because 3/5 Flying Death Touch is pretty whatever for 6 mana, and you maybe get to steal a Planeswalker if they don't have a piece of removal nor a counterspell. Like, yeah, sure.
Okay, I can think of one spot where you might like this.
Okay, where?
In the decks where people are playing cards where their show and tell matchup plan is to show and tell in that card. And a lot of those tend to be steal or copy effects. This is a really nice steal effect if you're not paying for it, because if they show and tell again, you have Death Touch.
Yeah, okay, so that's true. Like, it's not Megamorph, it's not like an awkward thing like that. It's actually like 3/5, steal your guy, Flying Death Touch, and that deck probably doesn't have a bunch of removal to remove this guy. Okay. One very
That's real marginal.
I think it's real marginal. I think I would rather most of the time play Gilded Drake or just kill them before they show and tell. I don't know. So, moving on. Dragonlord Kolaghan.
I'm going to go with Kolagan.
Kolagan.
Since it was Khans of Tarkir.
Cans of Tarkir. Anyway, 4 black-red. So again, 6 mana, 6/5, flying haste.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, haste.
So
very nice.
6 mana haste, 6/5. Seems okay. Like, it's not legacy playable. That's legacy playable at like 4. But okay, let's move on. Other creatures you control have haste.
Sweet.
Not bad. Okay.
I already want to play black-red EDH with this guy.
Yeah. Whenever an opponent casts a creature or planeswalker spell with the same name as a card in his or her graveyard, that player loses how many life?
10.
Wow. So in EDH, because it is a singleton format, as you may know.
Not gonna be happening.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Like,
it's interesting that they chose to make Elder Dragons and then gave one of them an ability that reads, "This does nothing in EDH." I think that's strange because, in general, when they print a legend, especially a legend mythic, at a really high mana cost, they tend to be very obviously pointed at EDH. And I think it's interesting that one of the abilities of this is just completely blank in that format.
yeah, like, I think there's other ways to, like, make this ability relevant. Like, when it comes into play, name a card. If your opponent would play the named card, they lose 10 life.
Man,
like,
this would be really good, though, against the Relentless Rats deck.
Oh, what? You have to assume that they have Relentless Rats in the graveyard, though. How can you imagine?
You're playing black and red. You can take care of that. I mean, if you have somebody in your EDH playgroup who plays Relentless Rats, they're going to be real unhappy when they see this.
Yeah, okay. Well, moving on. So then the most expensive one of the entire group, Dragonlord Atarka. 8/8, the biggest one, but also 7 mana.
Yep.
Sam.
It's 5 green-red. Flying Trample. When Dragonlord Atarka enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage, divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponent controls.
So he Bogard and Hellkites when he comes into play. So if you guys don't remember, Bogard and Hellkite does the same 5 divided any number of... He flies and he tramples. He's an 8/8. I think Hellkite is a 5/5. So is this better than that guy? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Would he be better if he had Flash? I still wouldn't play him in Legacy. Like, he's...
Bogard and Hellkite also doesn't have Trample.
Oh.
I mean, this guy tramples over a Grizzlebrand. Or I guess through a Grizzlebrand.
Wow, and they get to gain how many life after... Like, they gain 7. They probably draw 7 before that. Like, you're still dead. Like, it's...
None of these relevant in real formats.
Like, where does this guy become playable? 4 mana? I would say, okay, let's say 5 mana. So, like, you're on the play against a Jace, and they, like, Jace and Fate Seal to, like, get out of bolt range, and then you're like, oops, sorry, buddy. Put down my 8/8 Flying Trample, which, like, 5s your Jace, and it resolves miraculously against a Jace deck. That's a good card. I mean, how did the Delver deck beat an 8/8 Flying Trample that comes into play and pings for 5? Like, they don't.
Days.
Except for a counterspell, because, yeah. So is this playable at 4 mana? Yes. Is this playable at 5 mana?
Are there Nick Fit decks that play red?
There in fact are Nick Fit decks that play red. So at 5 mana, this guy's more than playable, because Broodmake Dragon is playable. Primetime is playable. At 7 mana, he's actually unplayable in Nick Fit, and I'll tell you why. Like, what you want to be doing in Nick Fit is, like, casting big threats that are hard to manage. So, like, Siege Rhino is great because even if he dies, you still get the drain, and it's okay. He's a
Thragtusk, same
exactly.
Similar thing. It leaves something. Grave Titan.
Grave Titan, same thing. Primeval Titan, again, same thing, because you go get Wolf Run, and if they do remove it, you still get Wolf Run, and if they don't remove it, they die the next turn because of Wolf Run.
I think we can suffice to say these are interesting, and this will be the last time you hear us talking about them.
Unless I shit on them for some reason. That's when I'll talk about them.
I do want to take this time to mention there is another mechanic that's not officially a mechanic, is cards that want you to reveal or control a dragon. We didn't talk about any of these because revealing or controlling a dragon, in existing Legacy decks at least, is very difficult to do.
Yeah, except for my dragon theme deck that I built, no.
I think the most obvious one of these as a potential playable in something is Silumgar's Scorn. Blue, instant. As an additional cost to cast Silumgar's Scorn, you may reveal a dragon card from your hand. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Well, that's boo-boo. If you revealed a dragon card or controlled a dragon card as you cast Silumgar's Scorn, counter that spell instead. So if there were a deck that could play double blue, this would effectively... that could play double blue and had dragons, this could be actual counterspell in Modern.
Oh, baby. So close, but not fucking good enough.
That requirement for dragons is real tough.
Like, I guess, like, if you have a Mutavault, like...
That's actually a really interesting point.
Like...
But then it's just cancel, because you've had to pay 1 for Mutavault.
Yeah, no, this card's bad. Like, in Legacy, I would rather just play Counterspell. In Vintage, I'd rather play Mana Drain, and in Modern, I would want to play that format.
Probably Mana Leak.
Yeah, Mana Leak's probably better. So, interesting ability. I see how they're trying to push the Dragon's theme down our throat, like...
Well, I don't think it's that bad, and there were some in Fate Reforged, there were some cheaper dragons, so it's definitely, it's possible that this could just straight up be Counterspell. I think that the chances of that happening in a non-standard format are very low.
Yeah. Yes, buy it.
And then, while we're on cards that don't really have a lot to talk about, there's also some commands in this set, but they are 2-color commands, which some of those are the cheapest commands we've seen so far. Do you want to go through those like we did with the dragons, or no?
Yeah, so we'll go in order. So Jarmoka's commands are green-white, instant. So hooray, we've got an instant. So it's like the charm, basically, right? So choose 2, and you have 4 possible modes. So, okay, this already seems like it could be promising.
I mean, 2 mana for two effects is obviously quite strong.
So let's see what those effects are. So mode 1... Prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn. So, you negate a bolt, you negate whatever. Maybe that's okay.
It would be, if that was something like life loss instead, that would be insane, because it would just counter tendrils.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Does stop Grape Shot.
Oh, wonderful. Target player sacrifices an enchantment. Actually, no one gives a fuck.
At least in Legacy, yeah, there's not a lot of stuff that you're going to be hitting with this.
So, sacrifice your counterbalance. Oh, I flipped a 2, so you actually don't matter. Mode 3, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Maybe that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's just alright. Mode 4, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control.
I know this is a mechanic you're a big fan of.
I'm liking fight, and instant speed fight even better. Mid-combat, they attack, and you're like, oh, giant Knight of the Reliquary fights your Delver, so I don't have to worry about not blocking it.
I think the most obvious time this is going to be played, or rather the most obvious pair of modes, is putting +1/+1 counter on a creature, and then that creature fighting.
Yeah. And it's just for 2 mana, could I just have a removal spell?
Yeah,
yes,
Swords to Plowshares or Abrupt Decay.
Yes, you could.
Probably always better.
So, I do not like this spell.
I think this is a theme that recurs through all of these, that there is one ability that's pretty good, there's a second ability that's okay, and the rest are just don't care.
Yeah. So do you want to go through Ujutai?
Ujutai's command, 2 white-blue. Choose 2. Return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. In Legacy and Vintage, that's super relevant. Most creatures are converted mana cost 2 or less, and that gets real nuts if you've got a bunch of mana and you return a Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, Snapcaster, even Stoneforge Mystic, like just for value.
Delver of Secrets.
Tarmogoyf. No, you're supposed to say another one, not repeat what it is.
Mode 2, you gain 4 life. Okay, that's fine. That's probably the one you go with if you can't do any of the other things.
So it's like Pulse of the Fields. Great. One part of it.
Counter target creature spell. Again, that's not bad. You know, especially if you did something like counter target creature spell, bring back a Snapcaster Mage, Brainstorm.
Yeah, and then the last one is just draw a card.
So I could see using the return or counter with draw a card. I don't think I could see doing those things together for 4 mana.
Would you is this ever better than Cryptic Command? No.
Doesn't have triple colored in it.
Yeah, I mean, but beyond that, I can counter a real spell.
You can play it a lot faster.
Yeah, I can counter a real spell with Cryptic Command. I still get to draw a card. I can tap down their team. I'm just not sure where I'd want to play this over, say, something like that. In Legacy, do I ever want to do any of these things?
And if you're gonna compare this to Cryptic Command, then you're talking about Modern. And I could see playing this in Geist and returning your Snapcaster Mage and bolting one of their dudes or something like that. Or
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot more creatures in that format, like countering a Termagoyf, draw a card, or counter a Termagoyf, get back my Snapcaster or something else. I could definitely see that being played in Modern. I don't think so in Legacy or Vintage.
Yeah, so, yeah, we'll give it the 1 thumb down, 1 thumb irrelevant. Silumgar's command, 3 and Dimir, so 5 mana. So this is a lot. This better be real good, right? This card wins me the game? It doesn't. Choose 2. Counter target non-creature spell. So does the complement to Ujutai's command. So that's going to hit a lot of stuff. Great. That's negate?
Yeah.
Great. 5 mana negate. Awesome. 2. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Chain of Vapor. Wonderful. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. Whatever card gives -3/-3 until end of turn. Destroy target Planeswalker. So, okay, so at its best, I get to kill a Jace and counter a spell on the stack.
I think you'd rather have Red Blast, you'd rather have Dreadbore, actual counter spells.
Or actual bounce? For 5, that's the thing, when I'm pasting 2 spells together, I don't want them to be more, I don't want them to be
it should cost a little less.
Yeah, let's put it this way, to get a negate and a Chain of Vapor, I feel like I should be spending 3 mana. Maybe less.
Well, you do also have to account for the cost of only having to have 1 card in your library instead of 2.
However, the cost is
it's not 3, yeah.
Yeah, do I pay 4 for the spell? No. Destroy target Planeswalker, again, it comes down to, do I get to kill Jace the Mind Sculptor? And the answer is, I can pay 1 red to kill Jace the Mind Sculptor. And I would not want to pay 5 and Dimir. 5, including Dimir, to do it. So,
I think you're being too harsh on these cards, considering that we already said that they are almost certainly irrelevant in our chosen format.
It's true. I just want to show
so
why...
let's get through the other 2. Next one is Kolaghan's Command, 1 black-red. That's a payable mana cost.
Yeah.
Choose 2, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That could definitely be viable. Sorry?
Raise dead, basically.
Yeah.
So target player discards a card. Okay.
That's all right. They get to choose, which is not great.
That gets a slot.
Destroy target artifact.
So
one more than Shatter.
But 2 more than Crush.
With additional stuff on it. Or deal 2 damage to target creature or player.
So, destroying an artifact and doing 2 damage. So it's like Shock plus Crush. So that should be 2 mana, but I get it for 3. No value. Discarding a card, so that could be like Funeral Charm, plus return it, Raise Dead, that should be 2. These modes don't add up to 3. Again.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't mind paying 3 for this. I just think there are better things you could be doing in a black and red deck.
Lightning?
Like Lightning. I think where this would have the most potential in Legacy or Vintage would be in Jund, because paying 4 mana for a Bloodbraid Elf and getting this, that's actually pretty sweet.
I think I would still rather Blightning in Legacy. I feel like I would be less disappointed if I went Bloodbraid Elf, Blightning you, get the fuck out of my game. That's instead of can you discard 1 card of your choice, so discard the land you don't need, and I'm going to deal 2 damage to your Deathrite Shaman. Wow.
Maybe we can play a red-black Waste Not deck.
Well, now you're talking.
I don't know.
I feel like I'm so angry at these cards. I apologize. If I'm a little bit
not
fired
great.
up.
I think probably the most playable one in Legacy or Vintage since we talked about Dracoma's Command. Let's get to the last one. Atarka's Command. Green and red. All right.
So
2
it's
mana.
destructive rivalry mana cost. Great.
Which, obviously payable. Your opponents can't gain life this turn.
So that could be interesting.
That's an effect that we already know is quite viable.
So, and then it deals 3 damage to each opponent. So each opponent in this format is going to be 1 opponent. So, bolting my opponent, fine. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. What land do I want at instant speed?
Probably a utility land.
Nah, yeah, still. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and reach until end of turn. That's interesting. Reach is ability that, we don't see a lot of reach, to be honest. We see flying, we see not flying, but reach is something that a lot of people don't really expect, I'll be honest. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. This is, again, being only 2 mana, it's more likely to be playable than the others. This is, again, very, very minor. But casting this in response to a chip shot Tendrils of Agony, a Tendrils of Agony where they've cast it just to stay alive, is pretty hilarious. Oh, okay, I lose 8 life, you don't gain any, and you're at 4, and I've got 2 Goyfs on board.
Yeah. So,
and I'm going to deal 3 damage to you.
3 damage to each opponent, so yeah, redirect to a Planeswalker, that might be okay. But, I would have just preferred creature or player, actual Lightning Bolt. Then I'd be a little bit more inclined to play this card. Playing a land, so it's just okay, I get to, on my opponent's end step, if it was bolt your creature, explore, that's fine. I guess mid-combat, you can, +1/+1 and reach all your guys. When am I going to want to reach all of my guys? They attack with 12 Lingering Souls tokens. Great. Oh, reach. Oh, cool.
It's funny. We went into this saying that there wasn't a whole lot to talk about here, but we've managed to at least record for over an hour and a half so far.
We've recorded about how these things could be better. How Wizards, how could you make these cards playable for us instead of the masses of people who want to play Standard or EDH? And I think it's maybe we're spoiled in our design space in that
Oh, we certainly are. I think a fair rule of thumb is 1 card a set.
Yeah. So what's our card in this set?
I think probably Myth Realized.
Yeah.
I've got one other potential one for you that we didn't mention.
I'd like to say Display of Dominance, but I don't think so. Sorry. So
how about Rending Volley?
Rending Volley.
It's 1 red, instant, cannot be countered by spells or abilities, deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature.
So is this not Combust? So Combust is 1 and a red, I believe cannot be countered, deals 5 damage. So now, I think with Combust, I'm not sure if the damage can't be prevented or not.
The damage cannot be prevented from Combust.
So Combust kills Tyranid Nemesis. Does this kill Tyranid Nemesis? No. Does this stop Splinter Twin combo from, going off? Yes. So, is this the death of Splinter Twin in Modern? I don't care, actually. I actually don't care. I guess if you want to absolutely positively have to kill that Stoneforge Mystic, sure.
I think this is, again, interestingly more vintage than Legacy. Delver of Secrets and Monastery Mentor.
Yeah.
Are the 2 best targets for this. Between Legacy and Vintage, I think those are the 2 best. And at least Delver of Secrets, I most of the time would rather just have Red Blast. Uncounterable is definitely relevant, but...
Yeah, but, when do I want to, I must kill this creature and I'm in these colors? I guess I want to kill their Stoneforge before they untap. I want to kill Delver of Secrets in the air. What are the other white and red, creatures in Legacy. Like, there's no Mentor. Like, those are my 2 creatures that I care about.
1 red, kill 1 angel token? Yeah, I don't think so in Legacy.
Yeah, I feel like I was so snappy today.
Yeah, you're very angry.
I'm so angry because I'm like, you're so close. Why aren't you there?
How about the new art for Duress? Is that the same feeling? Why aren't you there?
Don't even, like, don't get me wrong.
The guy in that art just looks annoyed, like, oh, this guy's yelling at me.
I'm super, like, I'm kind of a snob when it comes to my Duress arts for different reasons. So, like, there's nothing wrong with the good old, like, I've got something in my hands and now it's falling apart, Urza Saga edition. Nobody will fault you for liking that. 7th edition comes in Japanese foil. And a lot of people are really, like, up on this art. I like this art as well. I have no problem with this art at all. M14, I've got spines in my face is kind of...
Looks like someone's being tortured to give away information. I like it from a flavor point.
It's a flavor... Like, I don't like it, but flavorfully, it's fine. All of the other recent printings of this card are this art, the M14, whatever, like, all the box sets. Except now we've got the new art, which I think is strictly worse than all of them. Like, which I think, like, again, it brings me back to the direction of the way the art is going. Like, it's too busy.
There is a lot going on.
Like, I feel like it's too busy. I don't really, like, Duress. Like, is this guy Duressed? He just looks like he's going to get mucked.
Matt just wants every card to be Word of Command.
Yeah, just like 2 eyes. That's all I need. Like,
have you ever seen Word of Command played in real life?
Magic 94.
I have seen it played in Legacy at a competitive REL event. The person played it. The opponent said, wait, this works like this, right? And the person who played it said, I don't know.
Okay, well, I think that's acceptable if you, like, have them and you're like, let's bring these out today. Like, that's okay. Like, you can just confuse your opponents with it. Because what is it? You get to play a spell from, like, offhand. It's just like...
okay, without looking at it, I believe it is, you look at their hand,
you get to pick
a spell, and you control them for the length of picking this, for the length of casting the spell, to include choosing the mana sources that they use, but that's all that you control.
But I think you choose targets, do you not?
Hey, let's see. All right, let's look it up.
Like, this is by memory, so, like, this card is also...
Oh, also, this card is one of those where when somebody plays it, you just call it judge. All right, this card's Oracle text is 87 words.
Oh, boy.
Look at target opponent's hand and choose a card from it, period. You control that player until Word of Command finishes resolving. The player plays that card if able. While doing so, the player can activate mana abilities only if they're from lands he or she controls, and only if the mana they produce is spent to activate other mana abilities of lands he or she controls, and or play that card. If the chosen card is cast as a spell, you control that player while that spell is resolving.
So as if you couldn't get more confusing. So basically it means, like, you can control their mana to play the spell, or if they have some sort of, like, mana rock or something like that, you can, like, filter lands. You can filter, basically. So, is that card good? No, it is not. But in 94, oh boy.
Anyway, I think we're pretty much done talking about the set.
Overall, like, what's your overall impression of the set? Like, in 1 to 2 sentences.
Lots of interesting stuff, but no obvious goodies.
Agreed. Interesting stuff. Made me think about why they are so bad at designing cards for us.
So you're obviously not happy with the design. Did you think the first 2 sets from this block were better?
No. Because
one might argue that this is the problem that they've had, which they are trying to solve by only having 2 set blocks.
Yeah, no, I found this set also came really quickly after the last set. Like, I think this has to do with Origins and how they're kind of pushing up their schedule for the change, but, like, I felt like we just had a pre-release, and then it's like, oh, wait, there's more, and it's like...
It's always been like that, because there's basically a break for the holidays, and then they need to release another set before summer.
I know, it just always feels so rushed. Not much to say about that.
I will agree, though, that it did kind of sneak up on me. When we were talking about doing this episode, it was like, oh man, the set comes out, like, in a couple days, and I haven't even looked at the spoiler yet.
And it turns out it was already out almost. So, yeah, overall, nothing to see here, folks.
Anything else? Plays of the week, anything of that nature?
What did I get to do this week? I see trying out people out of games. I I got to play in Vintage. I played against Shops with Mentor.deck. I got to Hurkyl's Recall away my opponent. Not even for... Like, I needed to stay alive to get rid of the Kadoltha Forge Master. He rebuilds with Forge Master, and then I draw Yogg-Will, and then proceed to go, like, Mentor, Hurkyl's Recall you, do a bunch of stuff, gain, like, 6 tokens, and just absolutely blow him out. So it was Mentor good. I then, in the other game, proceeded to go, like, turn 1, like, Ingature you, turn 2, Meddling Mage, turn 3, Ingature something else. Like, it was a pretty insane blowout that probably shouldn't happen. So that was fun. I got to play some Vintage, so I was excited. I'm thinking about completing Shops. I just need to buy the Shops.
Have you completed your set of power? Has that arrived?
It's still with Greg. So, all the beta power's done. Shops is done, except for Workshop, so that's not a big deal. I'll pick those up before I go to Europe.
It's not a big deal, just like the most expensive non-power card in the deck.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so I'll pick those up, and I'll probably play Workshops at Progoturtle. I don't have a lot of experience with... I don't want to play Mentor. Like, I enjoyed playing Mentor in Vintage. I think it's a fun deck. I don't enjoy playing the deck, though. I thought Junk Hate Bears was fine, but not powerful enough. I enjoy playing Prison. I played Stacks in Legacy in the early/mid-2000s, and I enjoyed it. So I think playing a Prison Stacks archetype in Vintage is where I want to be.
So you're looking at playing like an espresso deck.
Yeah.
All right, I've got 2 real quick ones for you. The first is, since we've last recorded, so a couple weeks ago, I played at Star City Dallas.
Oh, okay.
I did awful, but I also got home from Dallas, 250 miles away, at like 6 p.m., so that was nice.
Oh.
But I had, in the trial, I was playing Blue-Black Reanimator, which I am definitely going to switch that to the green splash for Abrupt Decay. I finally decided that that's the thing to do. I go turn 2, Show and Tell. Mm-hmm. I put in Grave Titan.
Okay.
My opponent puts in Grove of the Burn Willows. And I'm just like, all right, feels good. I go, all right, turn 3. Like, I've got a Grave Titan. I'm going to win the game in 2 or 3 turns. I'm like, nope, feeling greedy. Show and Tell. Opponent says, yeah.
Why would you do that?
Opponent says, yeah, that's fine. I flip over a Grizzlebrand. My opponent flips over another Grove of the Burn Willows.
Oh.
Yeah, it was about the best Show and Tell that's ever resolved. I was very happy with it.
Actually, I have put in the straight nothing off of a Show and Tell. Just being, like, filled with, like, irrelevant spells in my hand and being like, I choose to write my selection on a piece of paper and then just, like, flipping over a blank piece of paper.
My greatest Show and Tell I have ever done was I played Blue-White. It's hard to describe. It was a Thopter deck, but I played Humility and Moat in the main board because I owned a Korean Humility and an English Moat.
Yeah.
And my opponent goes turn 3, goes Show and Tell, and I top, put it back. Yeah, that's fine. My opponent's like, all right. Flip over. I put in Humility. He immediately calls a Judge.
Judge, my opponent is not playing fairly.
He was like, I'm pretty sure he pre-boarded, but I'd been playing there for a while, and one of the guys who works at the store was like, no, this guy is just nuts and plays Humility.
Well, obviously you play Humility and Thopters, and you're just like, well, nice group of creatures you got there. I have many more of them.
I have many funny stories from that deck, but we can save those for another time. My other good recent story was I was playing Sean's Monastery Mentor deck that he posted on Eternal Central. I was playing online. One quick thing I want to point out, you hear a lot of people have bad experiences with their opponents online. I've found that in Vintage, that's not usually the case. Probably 25% of my games, me and my opponent chit-chat during the game. Just in chat like, oh, nice. Oh, that's a cool deck. Oh, wow, I wasn't expecting it. That type of thing. And we're having a back and forth, and we're playing, and I've got a pretty strong advantage. I've got 2 or 3 monks in play, and I attack, and he does something really powerful, and I was like, oh, wow, that was really nice. He says, yeah, I think I might be able to get out. I think I drew just the right thing I need to not lose. I go, all right. Untap, upkeep, draw, play Black Lotus, like 7 triggers go on the stack, and he concedes.
Oh, oop.
It's just like, yep, that card's that good. I just played an artifact and won the game.
I've really liked Mentor. I think the think tanks that kind of went into playing that guy in Vintage and trying him out, yeah, he's definitely better in a format with a lot of like zero casting cost spells. Because there have been times where I've been like, play out my Moxen, Hurkyl's Recall my Moxen back, recast all my Moxen, kill you.
Like, I don't know if you've done this yet. How great does it feel to play a Planeswalker with a Mentor out?
I mean, I have no problem playing Jace the Mind Sculptor.
I mean, like, play Jace, get a Monk, your Mentor gets bigger, then you brainstorm and probably play another spell.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. It feels real good. Or even just, like, Monk, brainstorm, hit Mox, mana, another mana source, put back 2 bricks, token, pass. So you're like, oh, even their Jace on board right now gets rid of the Mentor, I've got 3 tokens. Like, the pressure it provides is so interesting, and I really like it.
Alright. Well, we've run pretty long here, so I think let's wrap it up. I think we've done a good job looking through most of the stuff from the new set.
I actually want to do a thank you to Eternal Central. So, as you may know, Eternal Central has been our home for the past 2 years, basically. I think it'll be 2 years quite soon. And, they've hosted us, and they've done a really good job, and they've promoted us, and, our relationship started a long time ago, and we've known Jaco. Each of us has known Jaco for quite a while. And, it's one of the websites really promoting legacy and vintage content. And I just wanted to say that we really appreciate them hosting us for this long, and promoting, and just generally being good. So, once again, I think we can all kind of say, from the cast, and, thank you very much, and if you appreciate their content, do continue to visit their website and check them out.
Yeah, I would highly recommend supporting them through buying a lot of the premium content they put out. A lot of people are a little hesitant to pay for, but a lot of it's real good. I know I read Menindian's Delver Primer. It's like $4, which is not that much for someone who plays Legacy or Vintage, and it was like 60 pages.
Yeah, and reasonably, like, if you're buying, like, I know that I treat myself to some coffee or, stuff every now and again, and, like, those things cost, like, $4, so, save yourself a latte, read some articles. So, or if you just appreciate their content, send them an email saying that you appreciate it, because I'm sure they'd love to hear from it. Because, not everyone gets paid to release content, and some of the articles are definitely done from, just kind of the love of the game. So, if you appreciate it, give them a shout out.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. I've been Sam Craven.
I'm still Matt Pavlik.
Thanks for listening. Questions, comments, and observations are always appreciated. You can reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/everydayeternalpodcast, on Twitter at EternalMTG, in the comments section on our website, or on MTG The Source. Matt may be reached on Twitter at SDE_Matt. I may be reached on Twitter at TheCravenONE. Today's music has been 8-Bit Love Machine by Gumbell and was acquired via the Free Music Archive. Check out Gumbell on Facebook or at gumbell.bandcamp.com.